Thanks everybody for coming. Quick introduction to the Google NYC Tech Talk series. This is our, I'm going to embarrass myself, fourth or fifth one in this particular incantation. I want to thank you, Simon, for coming here. I'll do a quick introduction, but quick introduction to Simon in just a minute or two. But quick Google NYC Fun Facts. This is the Port Authority building. If you hear massive banging during this presentation, do not be alarmed. Behind that, there's a freight elevator, and if you look at the building blueprints, you'll actually realize that the freight elevator can carry an entire 18-wheeler up and down between floors. I personally want to find the buttons for that and start playing with it, but it's kind of scary sometimes. You're sitting here and you hear this loud bang and the floors start shaking, but that's okay. This building used to actually move buses up and down. That's what these freight elevators were used for. It's the second largest building in Manhattan in terms of total square feet, even though there's only about 15 or 16 floors. I imagine the Empire State Building or something like that is first. I don't really know, but this is the second. There's about 2,000 Google people here in New York, and prior to Google moving here, Google had an office in Midtown. And another fun fact about Google is we're not allowed to be more than 150 feet away from food, right? Food, as you can see from some of these pictures around here, food is definitely something that happens around here. It's part of the culture, part of the fun. So I put up some pictures of the Google office. I'll just kind of scroll them. We have a bunch of Lego. We have a cafeteria. The cafeteria's got a porch that overlooks the Empire State Building. It's kind of fun. This particular picture, the one on the upper left-hand corner, was actually made with Lego collaboratively by a whole bunch of Google people in about 24 hours. I remember I walked in one morning. Somebody gave me a pre-printed 8x8 Google Lego block, and was told to go and put these things in. And the next thing I know, they had about 100 Google people filling out these little 8x8 blocks, and then somebody went and assembled them. And then the next day, the CEO of Lego came and talked to us, and that was why we found out about this. So that was kind of fun. This red thing's also still around and made out of Legos. So that's Google NYC Fun Facts, just a little culture, briefing about the culture here in the office. Next talk, April 13th, Victor Miller, coming to talk about optimal locality, preserving hash functions. And I was just literally an hour or two ago, we also booked our May event. It's going to be Google's own Dan Sturman coming and talking about Google infrastructure as well. I don't have the exact date handy. Does anybody know the date? Sometime in May, middle of May. We'll be posting that up on the website as well. Both of these talks should be phenomenal. So today's agenda, quick, the networking that we had, my quick introduction. The main event will go from about, classic Google, we're running 7 minutes late. We'll go from 6:35 or so to 7:20-ish. We're only going to do about 10 minutes worth of question and answer. And we're going to go with the online questions first. So if any of you have laptops, there's free Wi-Fi here. If any of you want to post a question up on, if you go to the meetup.com page, the link is there. You can type your question, and then Simon will put up his questions and answer off of that. We'll also take questions from the audience, but we're going to stop it at 10 minutes, just so we can have informal Q&A and networking afterwards. Simon will be here. There's also lots of Google people here too. There's a handful of Google people. There are those of us that are wearing the traditional Google black, and in honor of St. Patrick's Day, there's some of us who, who have green T-shirts that the rest of us who don't have green T-shirts are very envious about. But the Google people find us, talk to us at 8 o'clock. Give or take. We do have to have a hard limit. Security will come through and start closing the doors, so we ask everybody to leave by 8:15 or so. Okay, I'd love to introduce a personal friend of mine, Simon Stewart, who came here specifically from this talk all the way from London. You can read his background. This guy's a software engineer, has been a software engineer his whole life. when he and I got together a little while ago, we actually realized that our past lives have intersected. At ThoughtWorks via some common friends, mutual friends, and stuff like that. It's very common in this industry. I thought when we started the series about 6 months ago, I thought we had Dr. James Whitaker, talking about a very different kind of testing than what Simon is going to talk about today. But both are very critical to an organization. And that's why we thought it would be very complimentary to have these two talks as part of this series. Simon used to work at ThoughtWorks and obviously is the lead contributor behind WebDriver. It's been said that Simon enjoys writing better software and beer, sometimes at the same time. Something that I'd love to measure is the quality of software before the beer and the quality of software after the beer. I tend to think one versus the other, but I'll leave that thought to myself. Simon says this is true. Simon.
Thank you, Harry. Wow, there's a lot of you. Last time I stood here, I tried to do a demo, and it went horribly, horribly wrong. Hopefully this time it's going to be better. I just need a couple of seconds to grab my laptop, swap over cables, and do exciting things like that. So the screen will now go black. So my name is Simon Stewart. I'm going to be talking to you about automated testing with Selenium 2. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I am on Twitter, SHS96C. If you want to ask me questions afterwards, as Ari said, we're going to have the automated links. So just head over to that incredibly long URL up there, which I will put on the screen for a fraction of a second to let you try and type it into a handheld device. Good luck with that. Excellent. So, wow, this is going to be really easy. So I'm an SET, a software engineer in test at Google. Does anyone actually know what an SET is or does? Yeah, I mean, not even Googlers are putting up their hands. This is one person at the back. Excellent. And at the front, thank you. So we are software engineers who are part of the engineering productivity group. Engineering productivity's, I hate the word, but mission is to enable Google to deliver software, maintainable software more quickly and more effectively. The key thing here is maintainable software. It's incredibly easy to write really grotty software if you don't have to prove it works. I do it occasionally after one too many beverages. But that way isn't sustainable, that way isn't good. A software engineer in test is a software engineer whose focus is working with a team, helping them with design patterns, architectural overviews, and helping them address their testing needs so they can write good, maintainable software. And that way, they can do exciting product releases like Wave. Which I was on, actually. It was a really good project to be on. The other thing that we do when we're not embedded in a team is we do tool development. So there are people working on linkers, compilers, and tools that are used by the rest of the group. I happen to work in the browser automation team, funnily enough, and we look after projects such as Selenium and WebDriver internally here at Google, as well as some of the infrastructure that we use for running the tests. So if you've ever watched any of the presentations that have been done at GTech, you may have seen things like the Selenium farm being mentioned. Pardon me. So that's basically what an SET does. They either work with the team and help them become more effective, or they work in the tools team and try and deliver the things that we need in order to go faster. We're hiring, by the way. Is that what you wanted me to say? Yep, good. Excellent. So who's heard of Selenium 1, Selenium 2, and WebDriver, and is just a little bit confused? Almost not. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's slowly going up. Yeah, there's more and more people. That's fine. Jason Huggins on the mailing list, Jason Huggins, the creator of Selenium, once came up with the perfect analogy, and I'm going to steal it wholesale and claim it's mine. And he started by describing Mac OS. So Mac OS from System 1 to System 9 had one API, and that API was Carbon. And then along came Mac OS 10, and the new API, Cocoa, appeared. So suddenly, if you were doing Mac OS development, you moved from Carbon, and you had 2, and slowly Cocoa became more and more popular, and Carbon is being phased out. Selenium, in this particular analogy, is Mac OS. Carbon, in this analogy, is Selenium 1, Selenium RC, and WebDriver is Cocoa. Make sense? Like, it always seems so easy when you find out finally how I'm getting thumbs up. Double thumbs up. Need 2 rainbows with that. That'd be great. So what is WebDriver? That's a very good question. And why is it better than the existing Selenium? Well, the first thing is it's got an object-oriented API. How many of you do Selenium programming in an IDE? Okay, a few people. So in an IDE, you can hit Control Space, and you get like a list of auto-completions. Now, I've got a 30-inch monitor. Occasionally, I just rotate it into portrait mode. So when I hit Control Space, I can see all of them in one go without scrolling. There are something like 130 methods on the core Selenium interface, which is too many for the human mind to comprehend. More importantly, the API has grown organically. So there's type keys native, attach file, key down, key press, key up, key down, native, key press, native, key up, native, so on and so on. Just this huge range of stuff that repeats itself. Obviously, hindsight is a lovely, lovely luxury to have, and I've got the benefit of it over Jason and the Selenium thing. So what happened with WebDriver is we learned from those lessons, and we applied some basic object orientation to the problem. There are 2 key interfaces: WebDriver, which models a web browser, and WebElement, which models a web element. We're not very good at naming on the project. We keep on giving them obvious names that you can guess. Terrible mistake, I know. So we've got an object-oriented API. The other thing that's sort of quite interesting is the reason why Selenium is able to cover so many browsers and support them quite well is because it's really an extremely complex JavaScript application. It's running inside the browser, written in JavaScript. New browser comes out, we tweak the JavaScript, it all works. That's fantastic. The problem is, it's written in JavaScript. And that JavaScript is running in a browser, and that browser has a sandbox that prevents you from doing interesting things. So file uploads, for example, are a devil to get right on Selenium as it stands. And if you take a look at some of the other bits and pieces, like the drag and drop spec from HTML5, is so horrifically complex that somebody wrote a ranting blog post about it and then deleted it. Getting that stuff right on a browser, fantastically difficult. WebDriver takes a slightly different approach. It's bound tightly to the underlying browser. With Firefox, we're an extension. We've got elevated privileges. With IE, we use the COM automation interfaces that IE has, and so on and so forth. What this means is that we're not in the sandbox. It means it's really hard to write a new WebDriver, don't get me wrong, but we're not in the sandbox. And we can do things like emulating user input at the OS level rather than the browser level. So our emulation of user input is brilliant, even if I do say so myself. The other thing is, like, web apps are becoming richer and are becoming more complicated. Whereas previously it was enough to just fill in a form, hit a button and wait for the page to refresh. Now people are doing things like select these 4 items in your Gmail inbox and then drag them onto this label, and they'll mysteriously get the label for you. Like, expressing those actions is a phenomenally complex thing to do. Erin Messery, who's sitting over there, is working on our Advanced User Interactions API. This is an API that allows you to do things like, say, click on this element, hold down the Shift key, click on this one, this one, this one, drag along a sinusoidal path, and release the mouse button. Currently, I don't know of any framework that allows you to express things in that way. Now, and it's kind of cool to be able to do that. And that uses the APIs that we've got, the native events that we've got access to. I think that's going to be really cool. That's a preview version is in the latest version, Selenium 2.0 Beta 2, and it'll be beefed up in Beta 3, which is coming out real soon. Alerts and prompts. Because we're not in the sandbox, we can do interesting things. Like if you write a Selenium test, you'll come across, you'll do actions, and it's fairly reactive. You know, load a page, click on this, type on this, and then occasionally you become prescient and you can see into the future and you go, there will be an alert. And when you see the alert, you will accept it. and then you go back to being normal. Like it's like you've become some sort of prophet or something like that. It's a weird inversion of the normal flow of control. Well, WebDriver, we step outside of the sandbox. We're not going to be halted if an alert pops up. So we've got an alerts and prompts API that allows you to carry on being reactive. You can go driver.switch to alert, and that will give you access to window alerts, prompts, and confirms, which is kind of nice. It means your programming model is, what's the word, consistent. Oh, yeah. And who's ever forgotten to start their Selenium server when running the tests? Yeah, I do it all the time. That's because I'm an idiot. The other thing that's coming up that's really, really exciting is 5 years ago, 6 years ago, nobody had on them a mobile phone that could browse the internet. Well, they might have, but it was a painful experience and they hated it. The iPhone came along, Android came along, and suddenly I'd be surprised if almost everyone in this room doesn't have a mobile browser, which they use at least once or twice a day. Like the uptake of the mobile web has just accelerated massively. So we're going to need to be able to test our apps on these mobile browsers. Probably. That would be a really useful thing. In the early days, we used to get away by changing the user agent of Firefox and trying to run the app through that. But the mobile browsers are different from the browsers that you've got on the phones, and so bugs were falling through and stuff like that. WebDriver has support for both Android and the iPhone with the same APIs that we use for everything else. In fact, I could do a demo. Well, I say I can do a demo. So here is a running emulator that I started earlier. I could show you me compiling it, but it wouldn't be very exciting. Here is a little IDE, and I will pop that open. I will zoom in. I will zoom in. I will learn how to zoom in. Can you read that? So this is what a WebDriver test looks like. The first line of it here just says, creates a new iPhone driver, which knows how to communicate with the iPhone driver that we've got, assigns that to a variable. We then go to google.co.uk. I'm a Brit. I'm going to advertise the UK version of our site. We then find an element. You remember what I said about this object orientation? Here we go. This is it in action. Find element, driver.find element by name queue. I mean, you could show that to somebody who's not a developer, and they'd probably understand what it is. They might go, I didn't know elements had names, but they'd understand what it was that you were attempting to do. We'll then send a keyboard input, the word cheese. Yes?
The question in flow, what about timing?
Well,
you have the interactive web
yep.
pages now, where obviously it's not just
So,
an alert, click, done. It's now bugs can occur
yes.
at any point.
I will cover that. So there's a question about timing.
Timing of inputs and such.
Timing of inputs and such. I will cover that in a minute. For now, I'm just doing the high level, hey, look, this stuff works, which is always nice.
Question popped into my mind.
Boom! If you'd done it on the Dory link, like the moderator link, then I could answer it at the end of the, at the end of the thing.
That would be excellent.
Indeed. We then submit the form, wait, we get the title, we print it out to the console, and then we quit the driver because we're good and we clean up the resources that we use. Make sense? Nothing too radical in there, I don't think. Now, the last time I did a demo here, it didn't work. I'd like you all to hold your breath briefly while I hit the magic incantation. Oh, look at that! It worked. It was incredibly fast. Did you see it do the search? Yes. Okay, I think that deserves a swig of beer. Cool. So browser automation frameworks, I've done some heavy thinking about this, and by heavy thinking I mean I've had a long chat with Jason, of three major pieces. The first piece is the ability to query the state of the app as it is right now. Now, browsers have a fantastic language for querying the state of the app as it is right now, and that language is JavaScript. It's just the perfect language for doing that. The problem is you're probably not writing in JavaScript. You're probably writing in Java or C# or Python or Ruby. So you need some mechanism to execute that JavaScript and get it into the browser ideally in the same context that the sort of rest of the scripts are executing in, because that would be nice. Of course, if you can query the state of the page, it's a bit of a boring test, isn't it? It's like fire up a URL and then loaded. You want to interact with it. That would be nice. So the third piece is to do with interaction. So going back to the query piece, the core of WebDriver is a library that we've been slowly extracting. Back in the old days, each driver had slightly different behavior because each driver had its own implementation of like querying the DOM and returning values to the user. And most of the time it was pretty good, but it wasn't consistent. And consistency is something that we all crave as slightly OCD computer people. So while we were casting around for a solution to this, Google released the Closure library. The Closure library also comes with a fantastic thing called the Closure compiler, which is a JavaScript compiler. It will compile Closure JavaScript and output more JavaScript, but minified and obfuscated with dead paths removed. It's brilliant. On top of this, what we did is we took the best of breed functionality from Selenium and from WebDriver and from some of the internal toolkits that we've got here at Google, and we extracted the smallest indivisible units of browser automation. We called them automation atoms because, well, it seemed like a catchy name. You know, and we refer to things as being atomic now, which makes it sound like we're stuck in the 50s looking into the future, which is brilliant because I want my flying car. On top of the automation atoms, we are layering the WebDriver API. So we're making the atoms conform to the API contract offered by WebDriver. We're taking the Selenium libraries from Selenium Core, Selenium 1, and we're also putting them on top of the automation atoms. So what happens is, as we're building up more code, we're getting more consistent behavior, and things are working far more easily. It also makes it fantastically easy to work on the code base because you identify a bug, you write a small reproducible test case in JavaScript, run it in a browser hitting F5 until you get everything working, and then you're done. We do absolutely crazy things to get these into a browser near you. It's like sausage making or law making. Like, you know, I can tell you the details, but you might be vaguely horrified. So I'm not going to go too far into it. If you are interested, come and find me afterwards, and I will go into great length and astounding detail. There we go, astounding. That's a word from the 50s, I think. So WebDriver isn't just about the technical side of things. I mean, I love the technical side of things. I'm a nerd. But it's also about making testing easier. One of the things we do is we're busy promoting design patterns that you can use on your tests to make them easier to write. Design patterns such as page objects. Anyone here familiar with page objects? Lots of raised hands. Anyone totally unfamiliar with them? Okay, lots of raised hands. So the idea is that your user interface can be thought of as offering a set of services to the user. So a login page offers the login service. And to do that, it needs a username and password. Gmail, if you go to compose an email, offers the ability to set the subject, the who it's to, and the content of the email, and to send an email. Okay, so it's human language and it's human facing. Facing the other way, a page object models these concepts. But facing the other way, sort of toward the browser, it has deep knowledge of the internal structure of the page. It knows that when you want to set the subject, actually it needs to find the element, you know, with the ID subject or whatever it's going to be, and it needs to send the keyboard event, but it might need to also sort of hit down in case there's an autocomplete list that comes up and blah, 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 and rah, 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 and all the things you don't really want to think about when you're writing tests. The nice thing about using a page object is it reduces the amount of duplication that's within your apps. Yeah, so when you change how the UI is composed, when you move things around, when you modify workflows, rather than having to go through 150 million tests, you only need to go to one place and fix it there. And that's kind of cool. The other thing that we talk about occasionally is bot-style commands or bot-style tests. So there are sometimes actions that people do regularly and repeatedly, and you find these sort of little clumps of code through the code base. Like the common one I see is when people want to answer their phone. Thank you. That's all right. When people want to set a form field, What they do is they go to the form field, they do clear, and then they type the value that they want to type in, so they know that the only content is the stuff they've done. And you see these 2 lines repeated all the way through the code base. The thing that we advise people to do is just put another layer of, we're computer scientists, right? Nothing can't be solved with another layer of indirection. So we'll just put on top of the existing APIs a nicer style API that conforms to how you would like the framework to be used. So rather than writing lots of repeated code, we reduce it down. WebDriver does some stuff to make this easier for you. For the Java users out there, how many people are Java users? How many people here are developers, by the way? Okay, most of you. That's good, because I'm about to go all developer-y on you, and that would be awful. There's the loadable component. That just provides a basic template method implementation, the design pattern template method, where you can go loadable component.get. It will figure out whether or not the page is loaded. If it isn't loaded, it will cause it to be loaded. If it is, it'll do nothing. It'll make your life a bit easier. If you're using the page object pattern, there's an annotation called find by. These look a little bit, he says. Da, 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 da. Play list. Here we go. Actually, I'll do the play homepage. Da, 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 da. Figure out how to zoom into the UI. There you go. You can see it all there. You didn't realize this was going to be a musical number. So this shows the implementation of both the loadable component and the find by annotation that we use just to make life a bit easier. You'll see there's an absolutely bonkers signature. Ooh, heavens above. Absolutely bonkers signature up here. Loadable component, play homepage. Well, that's what it is. That means that the get method will return the right thing. Is loaded, again, another bonkers signature here. Is loaded, but it is a void. What? The idea here is it's a testing side piece. So when your test fails, when the page doesn't load, you're making assertions about it. And rather than it going, no, it didn't load, it can tell you why it didn't load. In this case, we're checking that the base URL is contained within the current URL. And it knows how to load itself. That's kind of nice. The other thing we've got are these find by annotations. So that find by ID welcome get started thing means that we can avoid typing driver.findElement. People don't like verboseness in their tests. They find that it obscures the intent of what's going on. So this is a mechanism for getting rid of that. If you tried using the get started class like that, field like that, without first doing something, you'll get a null pointer exception. The doing something that you need to do is just using the page factory, init elements. It'll put a dynamic proxy in, and it'll all work as if by magic. Figure it out. Wow, how far can you zoom in with these things? Does anyone know?
Very fast.
Okay, it's really nice. And to answer your question, there's a mechanism for doing waiting. There are in fact 2 mechanisms for doing waiting, because I used to do Perl, and there's more than one way to do things. The first way is what I like to refer to as an explicit wait. This isn't one that swears. It's one that's marked out in your test very clearly using a wait interface and a WebDriver wait implementation and an implementation of a function from the Guava libraries. I've got one around here that I made earlier. Page object test. Boom. There we go. So this is the condition that we're waiting for. So we'll just check the current title. And this is what it looks like in usage. Wait until title changes from current title. Actually, that's nice and readable. You'll notice that the time that we're waiting for isn't put there. Like, I've seen an awful lot of code bases, and people just tend to leave the 30 seconds lying around, except it's not 30 seconds because inexplicably time is measured in milliseconds when you're dealing with a browser framework. So they leave 30,000 undefined units floating around. WebDriver, we believe in humans and human scale of things. So our currently undefined unit is the second, and it waits for 30 seconds, and it's on the wait. So rather than having that probably a constant, please let it be a constant, scattered all the way through your code base. You just put it in one place, and it's a bit cleaner and a bit neater. Must learn how to use keyboard. Oh, it's double rainbow. Will your tests be more stable if you flip from Selenium or another tool to WebDriver? Maybe, but probably not. Stability, there are a whole bunch of issues that affect stability. It's an entirely separate talk. Again, I'm happy to talk at great length about it later. But changing the testing framework isn't the thing that's going to make your test more stable. Identifying root causes and problems and addressing those, that's the thing that's going to make your test more stable. So how do you go from Selenium 1 to Selenium 2? You've probably got a pretty large investment, or maybe a tiny investment, or maybe no investment at all, but let's imagine a large investment in your existing Selenium tests. Nobody in their right mind would want to rewrite all of those, partly because the person who wrote it 3 years ago has left the company and nobody really knows how it works and stuff like that. Fortunately, if you flip to WebDriver, if you flip to Selenium 2, there's a migration path. First thing you do is you change how the Selenium instance is created. You run your tests. There'll be some minor differences in behavior. You gauge the effort required. If it's a tiny amount of effort, just move everything. If it's more than a tiny amount of effort, then you can do a piecemeal migration and just modify files as they go along. So, you know when I said I forget to start up the server? I was just about to forget to start up the server. Server standalone.jar. Boom, there it goes. So, I'll close this because I don't need it, close this because I don't need it, close this because I don't need it. I will open this. This, if you're familiar with Selenium, is a fairly standard test. We just get hold of a new instance. Oh, I don't know why I'm pointing over the cursor. We get hold of a new instance of Selenium. We start it because that's what you need to do. We maximize it, give the window focus. And then we go to the reader play homepage. Has anyone seen reader play before? It's brilliant. If you've ever got like a few minutes to kill, go to there and it'll just show you what like news stories that are coming up, but big pictures, and it's pretty. And like somebody with a short attention span like myself will go, "Ooh, look, shiny." We wait for the page to load. We click the getting started. Blah 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 blah. We do weird things like this. Key down, //39. Off the top of your head, does anyone in this room know what //39 is? Good, excellent. I didn't either. I had to look it up. So, I could run this test if you want me to. Do you want me to? Yes. You don't have to. I mean, like, it's just going to run a test. Musical interlude. So this is using the very tip of tree that I haven't checked in yet, so it might break. There we go, it's loaded, hey, and it scrolled right 3 times. //39 is right arrow key. To give you an idea of how easy it is to migrate, I'm just going to comment out how we get the Selenium, and I'll say instead Selenium equals new WebDriver back Selenium. And I'll try not to shout. New supply. I should have written this before. WebDriver. Oh, forget it. Let's do it. Let's do it the even easier way. Firefox driver. Yeah, no arguments. Space URL. That'll be started, so I can get rid of that. It starts up nice and big, so you can see it. There we go. So I've changed one line in that test. It now looks, because it was in tiny text before, it's gone from that to that. One line change. Ooh. Now to find out whether it works. Control Shift F10, zoom out, zoom out, zoom out. How much longer have I got? Here we go. So it's gone to the home page. Hasn't thrown an exception yet. There we go. So the test that we had before has run with no modifications other than the fact that I changed how we created Selenium. That's the sort of key to your migration strategy. 10 minutes. Excellent. Scary live coding. I'm a terrible typist. Well, you've just seen that. I should read these things, really, shouldn't I? Migration gotchas. So there are some differences that are going to come and bite you. The first one is locators in Selenium. You do, you pass in locators to almost every method. Selenium.type locator, selenium.setKeys, whatever it is. Those locators are sometimes implicit. So if they begin with a double backslash, it's assumed to be an XPath. If it doesn't have any identifying criteria, then it might be an ID or it might be a name. You never know for sure. It's very exciting trying to figure it all out. WebDriver is a bit more picky about you just knowing how your app is built. So it doesn't do a by ID or name. You pick which one it is, it's ID or name. As a rule of thumb, I found that it's generally an ID unless it's a form input element, in which case it's probably a name. The other thing that you see occasionally is people using Selenium core, which is a sort of layer on top of, it's the bit that runs in the browser, the JavaScript framework. You'll see this with getEval and people who do selenium.browserbot.something exciting. The WebDriver-backed implementation of Selenium isn't based on Selenium core. It mutates some of the common things that people do, because I realize that people use it, but it won't catch everything. And so if you find your test failing, take a look at where you're calling getEval or execute script, and that'll be the exciting thing. Another common pattern is Selenium didn't do very good. Selenium 1 doesn't do perfect user emulation. So you'll see sometimes like people who do, I've done some input, and now I'm going to call fire event with like a change event or something exciting like that. WebDriver does better emulation of user events. So what you might find is that that second firing will fail with a weird like stale element exception or element not found exception. And that's because the thing that you were going to kick off with that fire event has already happened because the emulation is better. And alerts, like I said, Selenium likes to see into the future, but it also stores bits and pieces in a separate location. So if you do a page reload, you're not going to be able to get back some of the values. Those are the major ones that we've seen. Most of those are pretty easy to work around. When can you start using this? In the next few days, hopefully, fingers crossed, if I can get Firefox 4 up and running properly, we'll release Beta 3. Beta 2 is already available. You can download it from selenium.googlecode.com. Or you can check out the code. The downloads are also available from seleniumhq.org. If you're a Ruby user, who's a Ruby user? A couple of you. You can do apt-get install Selenium WebDriver. It's pretty awesome. If you're a Python user, is anyone going to admit to being a Python user? Yes, brilliant. Wow, there's... Jython is brilliant. I love it. Sorry, we've got a Jython developer down here. Pip install Selenium, and you'll get that available to you. So we support languages, Java, C#, well, .NET really, Ruby, and Python. PHP is missing from that list. If anyone wants to come and contact me and say, I want to write the PHP driver, I will tell you how it can be done. Right, so I think that brings us to the question part of this talk. Apparently, Ari, are we hiring? Yeah, we're hiring. So go and chat to somebody in a black Google t-shirt and they will direct you, or a green t-shirt, especially green t-shirts, I'm being given the thumbs up, and they will pimp you the company. No, that's not right, is it? So, questions. Is there a way to record the browser in WebDriver so it's easier to debug what's going on? Okay, so that could be one of two questions. I'll answer them both as a special bonus. The first one is anyone familiar with Selenium IDE, the Firefox plugin that allows you to record tests? Some people really love that thing. Like, they give it a lot of attention and love. We are adding support for the WebDriver APIs to the IDE. It's not there yet. If you're looking to use it, you can do, there's an exporter, a formatter that will output the WebDriver back Selenium stuff for Java. So you can at least get started. The other thing that people sometimes want is the ability to sort of take snapshots or videos while the test is running. There is an interface that we supply called Take Screenshot, which does exactly what it says on the tin. It allows you to take screenshots. But we haven't got a video recorder that is available in the open source world. If you're using VNC, there's an application called VNC2 Swift, which will allow you to take a VNC output stream and just save it as a Flash movie, which is a kind of useful thing to be able to do. I hope that answers the question. Is there anyone that wants to ask a question on the floor, by the way? Sure, go for it. There's a microphone just there, so people can hear.
Hey, I've been using Selenium 2 for about 2 months now. I was using the alpha, now using the second version of the beta. One of the biggest problems that I've been having is this obsolete element error that gets thrown a lot, especially in IE. The biggest problem seems to be that what happens is the element is on the page and it disappears and it comes back again. And the only way to really handle that right now is to do this kind of ugly hack that does a rescue and then sleeps and then waits for the element to come back. Is there anything that can be done on the WebDriver side to handle that kind of condition? Okay, so the stale element reference exception is thrown when we've got a reference to an element and we can't find the document it's meant to be attached to by walking up the DOM. Now, there's a couple of reasons why the element might have disappeared. One of them could be that someone's deleted it using JavaScript. One of them could be we've done a page reload. One of them could be that we've deliberately detached it from the DOM, but we're keeping a reference in another piece of JavaScript so we can later reattach it. The problem is, from a framework level, all those three things look identical, which is kind of a pain in the backside. He says politely. I'm in New York. I should be a lot ruder, shouldn't I? Heck yeah. How was that? Was that good? Yes, thank you. I'll tell people to jaywalk across the street or something. It'll be very exciting. Sorry, that was incredibly camp. I'm sorry about that. So we can't tell the difference at the framework level between these things. And so we have to, because we can't tell the difference, we have to punt, and you have to put a layer of in between. So you're doing the right thing of catching the exception and waiting. There is a wait implementation, I think, for the .NET framework, for the C# bindings, which is. I'm using Ruby. Oh, you're using Ruby. Okay. I'm not sure if there is one. I think Yari Bakken is the. Yeah, I've emailed and IM'd him sometimes. Him and Jim Evans on WebDriver. Jim Evans and Yari Bakken are two of the open source contributors. They are awesome. Yeah. I am so impressed. One of the really nice things about the project, just as an aside, I'll ignore your question, is the community around Selenium of developers and users is really nice. It's one of the friendliest ones that I've actually come across as an open source user and developer. And the people that make it are people like Yari and Jim, Eran, who just are lovely to everyone. It's amazing. Sorry, yes. So you need to do exactly what you're doing. Okay. Sorry, that isn't a good answer, but at least you know why now. Fair enough. Thanks. Cool. Any other questions on the floor, or shall I go back to the automated ones? I have a question, but I'm still trying to formulate. Okay. I'll do this one then. What is the fundamental difference between Selenium 1 and Selenium 2 interacts with the browsers? I think I covered that, but basically Selenium 1 written in JavaScript. WebDriver, Selenium 2, bound tightly to the browser. There's some really interesting things happening. So the next release of Chrome 11, we're hoping to also release a version of the WebDriver APIs that has been developed in the Chromium source tree alongside, and delete the open the separate Chrome driver that we've got at the moment. So the Chrome driver will be maintained as part of the Chromium project. Opera have recently released their own implementation of the WebDriver APIs as well, the Opera driver. I think that's brilliant. It speaks to the long-term goal of the project, which is to help define a standard for browser automation. Because it's totally crazy that the Selenium team are trying to automate every browser on every operating system, including the mobile ones, which may not have a hook to get into them. And it's totally upsetting that people who are trying to write, automated tests, who are trying to do tasks where an automated browser would be really useful, have to go and download yet another project, yet another library, and have spotty support at best. It should be something that's in the browser. I strongly believe that, and we're trying to turn it into a standard. Cool. There's a.
I
Whoever gets to the microphone first can ask the question first. There's a microphone just... Yep. Good. It's there. What version of IE? 6, 7, 8. Beta 3, which is coming out soon, has pretty good IE9 support as well. So the full gamut of browsers of IE versions you're actually going to see in the wild. IE9 is fantastically brilliant and fast and slick. IE6 isn't quite so good. But Microsoft have done a really nice thing. Like, they've kept the COM automation interfaces that we rely on completely stable all the way through the development of these things. So, you know, when IE7 and IE8 came out, actually to support that we had to do very little work. Microsoft had done a fantastic engineering job. I know that with IE9 they've ripped the guts out and replaced it, but actually from our point of view it's been relatively easy to figure out the changes and just put the support in. Like, Microsoft had done a bang-up job with the engineering on that. Why does it keep on doing that? Come on, you can do it. Do you prefer running WebDriver from a command prompt or from an IDE, and why? Yes. Wow. It depends. While I'm developing it, I like running it in the IDE. When I'm running a suite of tests that will take an hour and a half to finish, I definitely prefer the command line, because then I can use my IDE to do other interesting things, like continue tinkering with the tests as they're compiling. What am I running? I don't really know. It's very exciting. You had a question.
My question was, with everything going to mobile devices now, to try to make sure across multiple platforms as well as in different browsers that your applications work efficiently and fast, what do you think is the next future to try to keep that sustainability?
Good question. So I think part of it is that we need the automation hooks baked into the browser. Like, browsers have been a major part of our lives for 10, 15 years now. Like, we've been using these things for a long time. Testing frameworks like Selenium, like WebDriver. Selenium's 6 or 7 years old. WebDriver's just past its 4th birthday. Like, we know what these APIs look like. They're not experimental anymore. We should put them into the browser for the bits that we know. There are interesting times ahead. I think we may be on the cusp of going back into the dark ages because of the canvas element and the video element. These opaque things that haven't got an automation API and that people can do anything they want with. Like, people go to me, how can I test my canvas-based application? It's like, well, have you put any testability hooks in? No. Like, we may end up having to do some sort of visual recognition or something. And that, yes, there's a snort of derision from the audience.
Yeah, because even mobily... Okay.
Visual recognition is ugly in this context.
Visual recognition is indeed ugly in this context, and fragile, and a remarkably poor idea. Because I'm a big fan of TDD, like, need to be able to write these things in advance. So I think part of it is going to be developer education. Like, we're just going to have to sit down with developers and go, look, if you want to be able to automate your app, I know you've got all these possibilities, but like, and we don't want to take those possibilities away, but provide the hooks we need in order to verify that your applications are correct. Because otherwise, like, there's a whole stack of really difficult problems that are coming just around the corner.
Because a lot of apps are trying to dumb down what the actual website is on a regular computer than it is on a mobile device, and they're learning that they're going to have to put less and less because there's oh so much space on the actual mobile device when they're designing their websites, when they're designing the browsers. Because I know Firefox has a browser app. So does Google. When you do a Google search, they have their own browser app.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, there are hybrid applications that are coming out where you've got a native component and then a web view. There is a project that I'm not sure I should talk about called Skytree, so I don't tell you about it, written in Tokyo. I haven't told you that. Where they're attempting to write an API that uses the WebDriver stuff to test native apps, particularly on Android. Certainly didn't tell you that. And then we're trying to figure out how to hook that into WebDriver so you can do like part native, part web driven, and just try and do the right thing. It's interesting times, like, you know, in the proverbial sense. Like, yeah, I don't have a good hard and fast answer. I've got ideas.
Okay.
And I think hybrid tools are probably going to feature quite heavily.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go for it.
Maybe a segue there. But are you guys doing anything with Flash or Flex? I know Jim Huggins, he's with Sauce Labs now.
Yeah, Jason.
So they've been doing a bunch of stuff with Flash and
Yep.
Flex automation. And are you guys thinking about it? Are you guys going to bake that into WebDriver?
So you know the Unix philosophy of like a single tool doing one thing and one thing well? Like, I really do think that's the right way to be writing, testing tools. Like, just focus on the one thing. The problems are big enough as they are without trying to solve every problem. The Source Labs stuff that they're working on hooks on top of a project by Adams. ADMC is his username. Yeah, thank you. Called FlexPilot. What that does is you compile your Flash movie with an extra module, and then it opens up some automation hooks. Those are accessed through JavaScript. Now, WebDriver's got pretty good capabilities for executing arbitrary chunks of a particularly malformed JavaScript. So there's no reason why we can't use the same automation mechanism. So I'm not going to bake it into the framework, but what I will probably... I've missed where you are. There we go. I'm not going to bake it into the framework, but I will make it easy for people to make use of tools like FlexPilot. The other side of the equation, like sometimes people go, I want to modify headers, and I want to mutate content as it comes from the browser, from the server, and I want to measure content length and stuff like that. That's the sort of thing that's best handled by a proxy. So one of the nice things you can do with WebDriver is it's pretty easy to specify the proxy that you want to use. So there'll be a separate project which does a fantastic recording proxy with mutation capabilities and all the bells and whistles. That's outside of scope for the project, but again, we'll make it easy to hook in and take advantage of that stuff.
But when you say you're going to make it easier to hook in
Yep.
FlexPilot, like what does that mean? Like, right now it's relatively easy.
Yeah.
So
I haven't looked at it too deeply, but there will probably be a thin shim layer that abstracts away some of the common JavaScript executor things that you need to do. I noticed that Ari is looking at his clock and
I think maybe two more questions.
blinking at me.
We'll just make it informal after that.
Okay. Gentlemen.
I have one question regarding support for PHP. So
Yeah.
thinking about supporting PHP automation in the future.
Good question. The question was, are we going to support PHP in the future? I'm going to do the answer that I always give people, which is, it's an open source project. Anyone can check this stuff. It really is an open source project. Like, there are open source projects which companies work on, and they've got like their own little internal version, and they go, chunk, and they throw it over the fence. And they go, look, we've done a new release. That's not how this project is run. We run the entire thing out in the open, and we take snapshots back into the company. So PHP support, so far nobody has come up, sat down next to me and gone, I want to write this. One person did. I was at a hackathon in San Francisco. He had working PHP bindings within about 2 hours. And then he forgot that he had a hot date with his girlfriend and got a really annoyed phone call. And left in a hurry. And I haven't seen the PHP bindings since then. I know they existed for a short while. Shouldn't laugh at that. That's not good. I mean, shouldn't laugh at it. But we do anyway. One last question. Gentleman at the back there.
Do you plan to release suggested frameworks like how to use WebDriver for creating pieces like use short snippet of code, or try to build that to do something that's bigger to make the coding easier?
So the question is, are we going to release snippets of code to make it easier and demonstrate how to use the framework? Right. So if you go to seleniumhq.org, you'll find an awful lot of documentation there. We're working on beefing up those docs so that if you're new to the framework, you can just go there, read it, and get sort of insight into how it might be used and what you can do. One of our release items before we do 2.0 final is to have some example applications, some example code, so you can go like, how are you meant to use this? What are the patterns that people use? how do I set things up, stuff like that. So for seleniumhq.org. So if I just flip back to the presentation using the keyboard shortcut, which I don't remember, and go to the final slide. Boom. There it is. That second link there. seleniumhq.org. There are docs there. So yeah, we want to make this stuff really good. Everyone, I think we're out of time for questions. I'm going to be around for as long as is necessary. Thank you all for your time. Thank you all very much for your attention. I appreciate it.